changes the subject, he's immediately on looking for supporting sound effects.
Okay, stand by, Mitch.
Danny Bob.
In a vast wasteland of entertainment where radio has become obsolete, stands an embittered man teetering at the edge of sanity. With help from radio friends, he's about to embark on a global mission that would change the course of history as we know it. Broadcasting live from the secret studios on the banks of the Brandywine River in Delaware is Mitchell K.C. Hill. And up to the Great White North in Vancouver is Alexander Knight.
You know, I'm thinking if we do this, what we should do is it should be my face in the shot like it is right now, but do it like Clutch Cargo. Remember the old Clutch Cargo commercials or cartoons? And hold on, I got to turn this thing off. Don't you hate it when they leave your little things on? And just have somebody doing the lip syncing, and in the head is just a freeze frame. Anyhow, I'm dating myself. Not many people know who Clutch Cargo is. Way back when the cartoons were funny. Welcome to the Last Angry DJ. It's myself and Alex talking today, and we usually refer to that as broadcast boffins, which is a term I don't think is big here, but it's big in England and it's big out there in perhaps in Canada. Where did you get the broadcast boffins nomenclature thing, whatever?
You know, I just I was just cycling through a handful of titles, and it didn't take me long to land on boffins, and I also like alliteration. So broadcast boffins seemed appropriate for the regular recurring show that the two of us use. By the way, this is episode 34. I can't believe we've actually made it. So thank you to all who have supported the show. And of course, as we usually like to say, this is the show where we interview luminaries in the broadcast world, engineers, salespeople, marketing people, independent business owners. But today it is just Mitch and I, so we should have some fun.
Yeah, and I was just looking at the chat. We're going to try some new chat stuff out, but I still saw that John Preto's there, and he said that he and Bill Davis are going to start their own podcast called The Last Happy DJ. Just to be that way. So these guys that we keep pulling their names out, these are all of our friends on office hours, because we have a big crowd of office hours people, since a lot of us have been on office hours. And that's the famous two-shot that you're seeing right now. We're going to talk about podcasting and what it takes to do podcasts, and maybe a little bit of we'll uncover a little bit of how we do ours, because as Alex said, this is our 34th show. I think officially, Alex, today we'll say we're no longer surprised that we've lasted this long. We're now on our way. We're approaching a year. I guess a year, and you were saying March something or other.
March 12th, something around 2025.
March 12th. Great.
Yeah.
And when we have that, a huge celebration will ensue. Perhaps we'll have pizza for everybody. Hopefully, we can do that. But we'll talk about podcasting, because that's a big part of what a lot of people do. And ours isn't really a podcasting. It is a podcast, but it's also, they call it a vodcast, because it's video and podcasting. And we kind of picked up that from Office Hours again, because Office Hours records live, and then it's available to view later on, and maybe as an audio podcast or as a video vodcast. And other people do that now too. So it's interesting. Why is it important to have a video and just not just audio? Because I think that it's more enjoyable. But the other part is that if you're bored and you want to look at something and see funny faces, old guy and young guy, who will pop in at any moment, talking about stuff, then you have that to go with. But the cool thing about it is that you can break away anytime, jump in your car to go get a hamburger, and still listen to the podcast, which is The Last Angry DJ. And you're not going to miss anything, because we're what we like to refer to as a do something with entertainment. In other words, you drive your car, you cook a meal, you relieve yourself, whatever it is that you like to do, but you're listening and you don't have to worry about the camera or the video being rolled at the same time. You know, TV, you have to watch it and you have to engage in TV. Podcasting, you don't. You can do it with anything. So that's the fun part. And we're going to talk a little bit about, I think, what makes this happen. This podcast would be completely devoid of graphics and cool wipes and 2-ups and all that stuff that we like to use. If it wasn't for Alex doing what he does, and Alex has a few people I'm sure that he would like to give credit to that makes all that possible. I would just like to start out, well, I've said it before, I'll say it real quick. We learned a lot of what we do, the look of our show, the sound of our show, the quality level that we like to choose to maintain. We learned that from Office Hours, which is a regular show that you can see at officehours.global. So we want to give them credit where credit is due. But how do we do this? How do we make this look and sound so good, Alex?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of tools that are available to do this. But one thing I just want to say, and just bringing it back to the world of broadcast and terrestrial radio and how things were done when you were on the air, Mitch, too, is that really the way broadband technology and the internet, I would say in general, and especially in the last, I'd say 5 years, things have evolved so rapidly now that people are able to do, I think, shows beyond what we are accustomed to seeing on even broadcast television. I mean, there are examples. I mean, not just what we do. Obviously, this show is inspired by a lot of the things that I've learned on the other show that I'm on called Office Hours Global, and I think a lot of the tools allow us to do quality that surpasses what you see on broadcast TV, because a lot of that infrastructure, broadcast TV, they've spent millions of dollars on technology, but a lot of that technology is aged out now, and they're not necessarily taking advantage of all the tools, and they're just doing things the old way. And that's kind of the underlying concept. We come back to this a lot on The Last Angry DJ, is this show is very much a discussion about the intersection between the old guard and the new guard. So terrestrial radio versus podcasts, YouTube versus radio. Those are all different mediums, and things have evolved quite a bit over the years, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. And to answer your question, Mitch, how do we do this? Well, we wouldn't be able to do the show without Mimo Live. This is not really a commercial, but more of just a thank you to the people at Boeing Software who's really been instrumental. In particular, Oliver Breidenbach was really helped guide me and has been super patient at answering all the questions that I've had on how to actually use this application. Of course, Mimo Live is not the only program in the game. There's lots of tools, like I said, that can do this kind of production, allow us to be on the opposite sides of the world. You know, I'm in Vancouver and you're in Delaware, and you can see the quality that we're doing right now. So, broadband technology and specialized tools have really changed the game, right?
Yeah, Mimo Live is a video production house in a box. It's all done in software. And eventually a lot of this is going to go to the cloud, where you won't have to have any equipment. You won't have to have an ATEM. You won't have to have crazy encoders. It'll all be done in software. With the new M4 chip on the horizon, could be announced as soon as a few weeks from now, chances are that Apple's going to up their game as a platform. A lot of us have made the switch back to Apple. I was always an Apple fan, went to PC because I was using very specific software that required a PC. And then around the time of Zooming, I kind of got back into the M1 Mac, the Mini, and that sort of pushed me into, wow, it's like amazing how much you can do with an Apple, especially a silicon-based Apple that's using their processes to do what they do. And they're I think with M4, they're going to be beating I know I'm going to start a firestorm, but for our friends out there that are Windows friends, the M4 supposedly is more powerful than any of the other ones out there. AMD, Intel, perhaps even NVIDIA. It's going to be quite the amazing thing. So, we can talk about those things a little bit. And by the way, as we go, if you have any questions and you're watching on YouTube, feel free to jump in on the chat, because we can actually bring the chat in now.
Let's just actually jump into that just a little bit here, because the chat's quite lively today, and I wanted to bring in some of those people. Robert Shoji had a good question here about, of course, now the chat's not going to pop up. He is asking, what has been the biggest challenge in producing our show? And for me, I would say when we first started doing this, I was doing what we call a screen scrape of Zune. kind of like an animal, which basically means you run the vanilla Zoom client, you're not using any specialized tools, and you're basically taking a screen grab of what you see on the screen. And it's really hard that creates some complications because you get some what we call screen debris, which is you're trying to hide all the buttons and all the stuff that is on the screen there. And, it has limitations. And of course, now there are a lot of specialized tools that can utilize Zoom and connect to a meeting, but they allow you to pull isolated video feeds and isolated audio feeds out of it. And generally what that translates to is no cruft on the screen, better audio and video quality, better frame rate, better color reproduction. So, there are tools like Zoom ISO built by the people at Liminal, which is now owned by Zoom. And of course, Mimo Live has native Zoom integration. So I can pull out all the people that join my meeting and basically have separate feeds for them, and I can control their video independently, I can control their audio independently. And that is a game changer. Like for me, that one of the biggest challenges was just getting good video quality out of Zoom in the first place. And Mimo has really improved that. I guess the other challenge, of course, and I touched on this at the beginning of the show, is that I'm only one person. We don't have a staff, so I wear probably way too many hats normally in a production with a bigger budget of bigger than zero, I should say. You'd have a technical director, you'd have somebody who's an audio engineer, you'd have the guest liaison who preps all your guests and everything like that. And you'd have a hair and makeup person. This is like in the broadcast world where you have a big team of people. But it's really challenging, I will say, being a co-host, talking and also pushing buttons. And that means that sometimes I make mistakes. I stay too long on a shot, so it's not perfect. And, until the show starts making money, I would say, Robert, that is the biggest challenge, is just wearing too many hats, trying to do too much. And it is what it is. I'm trying to do the best I can.
Also answer the question, Alexander does all the TD stuff. He does all the producing. He is the producer. About the only thing I do that goes into the category of producing is that I'm also a graphics designer. So I design this little doodad here. I designed the logo. I'm into that. It's not that Alex can't do it. It's just what I happen to do and bring to the party. So, dividing the duties a little bit around, I leave it totally in Alex's hands to decide technically what we're going to do. And he constantly is pushing the envelope of what's new and also how it's possible for him to switch to show. Because I think the future of doing broadcast programs, whether it's a vodcast or a podcast, is more and more people are going to be less and less people doing it. In other words, it could be done by a single individual that has a particular show that they want to host. They're going to be doing everything, and they might be using a Stream Deck, or it might be switched on the cloud. They could be using Mimo Live, which works on a Mac. They could also be using Ecamm. Ecamm now is integrated into Zoom. Maybe we should talk a little bit about what was announced at Zoomtopia, because there's a lot more integration now into what we do as podcasters, as broadcasters, where it's not just having a meeting, a business meeting where you've got, all the little boxes with the people meeting up like Teams or in Zoom. I think a lot of what was done on after hours and office hours was born out of using Zoom ISO, which Andy Carluccio invented and then got purchased in part of Zoom, and now they have him in their organization. And he's a great guy, very generous with his time. All of the people that we work with, I think that's part of the joie de vivre of what it is. I just did French. Of what we do on our program that makes us happy is the camaraderie that we have. I mean, look at the people that are chatting along with us. A lot of our very old friends that have been with us all along have things to say. They all collaborate. They all are very open. There's no secret sauce to how we do our program. So that way, when we have all that stuff taken care of that Alex was talking about, then there's more room for us to concentrate on the content, because ultimately it's the content that's king, as it always has been, whether it's radio, TV, or podcasting. It's what we're talking about, whether it's interesting. Do we have any interested chats coming in?
Yeah, and actually, I just want to give a shout out to. We have a newcomer. We've got in the chat Alan Hart, and he says hello from Italy. I didn't realize we had anyone outside of North America watching. So
ciao, baby.
Hello.
Ciao. Bella, bella, molto bella. Thanks. So good to have you here. We're really not an international show, but look at it this way. I mean, Alex is from, Port Coquitlam, which is near Vancouver, and I'm from Wilmington, Delaware. I'm a small town in the east coast of the United States, sandwiched in between Wilmington, Delaware, and Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. And the only reason people know that there is a Wilmington is that the current president is from this town, which is kind of cool. But getting back to what's fun about doing a podcast, I would say the most important thing, if that question has not already been asked, of doing a podcast or a vodcast is if you're going to do video, you've got to be pretty gutsy because it takes an investment of time and equipment and facilities to make the image look good. Now, you see mine. I've got a lot of stuff going on. My idea about having video is to have a reasonably good camera. I've got a Sony FX3. I have it because at the time that I bought it, there were no FX30s, which would be what I buy now. But what makes the Sony good is that fantastic Sony autofocus. As of course, it's not going to do it now. But, like that fantastic autofocus, I got to fix that. It's a little issue I have. But you don't have to be sitting here doing this all the time to get your face into focus. So that's kind of it's not a secret that we're using that kind of autofocus. And I think on office hours, even Alex has made the move over to Sony. Give me some credit where credit is due. I want some cred. So that's part of it is you got to look good. And here's the problem. Even on big news networks that have millions and millions of dollars to spend, like CNN, when they bring guests in, it runs the gamut from like really bad, like really like Logitech 920 cameras or laptop cameras that are set low and their angles are looking kind of goofy, all the way up to maybe reasonably good quality. They seem to say that they're using Cisco technology, but I think they're just branding it because even Cisco has looked better than I've seen it on CNN. And part of that problem, and I'll start yakking because you have to tell me to shut up at some point.
We'll get to that's okay. Finish your thought, but we got more questions too.
Yeah, real quick thought. We're living in the age of that's good enough. And that's affecting a lot of us perfectionists of video, audio, image, branding, all of those things, whatever you happen to be doing. It used to be that it had to be, well, that was good enough. So we'll put up with that. MP3, it was good enough. Well, I'm here to tell you, MP3, get rid of it. Get rid of them all. Switch it all over to linear PCM. All right, Alex, sorry. I was yakking away there. What do we got? Question-wise.
Yeah, no problem. We've got a question from, hold on a second. Where am I? We've got a question from Robert Shoji. Mitch, what lens are you using with your FX3?
1727 Sony. It's a Grandmaster. It most definitely is overkill. When you're in a room and you're trying to find a good distance to be away from the camera. I have a teleprompter. I have a small teleprompter, not a big one, just so I can make eye contact. You got to be careful of the lens you get because the lens can push up against the teleprompter, and then you get vignetting and other issues. But once it was all dialed in, it's probably working around 50 millimeters, somewhere in that neck of the woods, about 3 feet or 2.5 feet. I haven't measured it lately. So that works well. And the reason I'm using Sony on Sony is that it's just that much better when you use Sony lenses with Sony cameras. I mean, a Sigma would probably get darn close, and maybe you wouldn't see the effect between the two as an A/B comparison. But the Sonys are just that much able to speak to the camera body to make that autofocus work so well. The one I was demonstrating earlier that didn't work, is it going to work now? There it goes. That's autofocus from Sony. And then now I'm stuck. Oh, it kind of snuck back in. So that's answer your question. A 1727 millimeter the grand version, anything that has a G Master logo on it is top of the line, you're going to pay $3,000.
Yeah, what's that saying they say about you date the camera body, but you marry the glass. I'm not on a Sony camera. I wish I was, and I probably will move to an FX3 at some point. That's my goal. But I'm on an older Panasonic GH5, which doesn't have the greatest autofocus. You know, I was using a manual lens for the longest time, and right now I'm experimenting with this. This is a Panasonic. I already had the lens, but it was being utilized on another camera, so I just moved it to this one just to try it out. This is a 25 millimeter Panasonic lens with autofocus, and so that's roughly the equivalent of 50 millimeter, and I have it about 4 feet away from me. And although the autofocus is not as good as Sony, it's good enough, and I've tweaked it to the point now where I think it works reasonably well enough. Like if I put this in front of me here, this will probably take a second to snap in there.
In front of your eyes.
Yeah, well, it's not doing. I'm not doing.
Oh, you don't
tracking
do that
right now.
There it is. It just snapped
right there.
in.
So there we go, and then it should snap. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, it's not as good as the Sony stuff, but you know, for a micro four thirds camera that didn't cost me very much, I think I paid $500 used.
You know what? I think
this.
your camera looks great. I honestly, if I put yours next to mine and try to decide which one looked better, we're doing a Zoom call. We're highly compressed anyhow. I don't think you're going to see gigantic increases in quality until Zoom ups the game as far as the going to 4K. Didn't they just, by the way, just as a side, didn't they announce that they're going 1080 on single licenses?
Yeah, that's another
big.
thing. That was a big announcement. So it used to be that if you were using Zoom, so for example, like the Pro license, you could only get 720p, but to move up to
after
the
you requested it, by the way.
Yeah, you have to ask for it too,
720.
which is crazy to me. But the business plan, I think by default you had to buy a minimum of 10 licenses, and so you're spending it's like several $1,000s a year just to use that service and get 1080p. Which, by the way, again, you only get that once you submit a ticket and ask them and explain what you're doing. But now they've made it so, and it hasn't rolled out everywhere. I know when we last talked about this a few days ago, it wasn't available in the US, but in Canada, when I go to the Zoom website, I can now sign up for a Zoom Pro account with only one license, and I can pay $30 a month and get 1080p, which is pretty astounding. I mean, that just makes Zoom more attainable, and to a lot of people, a lot of content creators that just don't have the budget, can't afford $2,000 a year for licensing, right?
Yeah, we're small fry, and like anybody, and this is, I think, falls into what we're talking about podcasting. What does it take? First of all, it takes utilizing as much of the stuff you have sitting around. When I built my Zoom room, even before I was involved in office hours, I'm a little bit of a geek nut, and I had a lot of stuff lying around. I mean, I had all the audio stuff. So I had the U87, the Wheatstone console. I did not have the on-air light and the other stuff that's bouncing around behind my head. And as I got onto a program like Office Hours, you could do it with other ones, but Office Hours was a good place. People helped me tweak it. Like Chris Fenwick was saying, you really need to use like a blue wash on that wall back behind you just to give it a little punch. And everybody decorates their background. And the other thing, and it just gets back to Robert's question about lenses, if you get a lens that has decent quality, to get a bokeh out of it, particularly if you can open it up, if it's a fast enough lens, you get a little bit of that, bokeh quality, which is when things go out of focus in behind you. And that kind of adds a little more emphasis to the people in front. What you don't
and Mitch, do you have
ever, let me just throw this one out there. Never, ever use a virtual background. It's just caca. Please don't do that. Because you're not Mitch, impressing anybody. Sorry, go ahead, Alex.
Do you have any kind of filter on there? Do you have a black Pro Mist on there to soften your skin?
I tried it, and then I turned 70, and I said, "This is a losing battle. What the hell?" Even as Cinetone, which is one of the presets in the Sony camera, can't fix this. So it is what it is. I just decided nothing. I'm just going to let it go out there, and if you like it, you like it. But when you start getting closer to the camera, you start looming over it, then you start seeing the craters and the broken capillaries, I'm looking at myself right now. That's when you start nitpicking. Hey, look, it's a rabbit hole you're going to jump into when you start doing your Zoom calls or podcasting. You're gonna be happy, and then you're going to be very unhappy as people start saying, "Well, shouldn't the microphone be in the shot? Shouldn't you have this over here? And why do you have that Sockler tripod? I've seen it sitting there for years on end. It looks like you never used it." The answer is I haven't. The coolest thing I have is my U87, which I don't use on a podcast, and my neon on-ear light. Mm-hmm. That's a true neon. And why am I not using the U87? That's another question I get. It's because it would be total overkill. I mean, the AKG 414 that both Alex and I use, he's got a different model of it, but it's essentially the same mic. It's good enough for what we're doing, and it sounds great. You could, if you were just starting out and you wanted to know, how do I sound great? And by the way, that's a good choice because sound is so much more important than any of this other stuff. A Shure MV7 Plus would be a very good choice. It's kind of like the microphone of choice. But there's other ones too out there, right? You're the microphone guru. Tell them.
Yeah, there's a lot of options. I mean, for dynamic microphones, certainly if you're on a budget, the Shure MV7 Plus is a good starter as a hybrid microphone because it does both USB and XLR on it. By the way, I skipped over this, but this is an important point I just wanted to bring up with the chat that John Prada was saying that in his 30 years of experience that generally on demand, or the ratio of like people that watch live versus on demand is about 8-1. So clearly a lot more people watch on demand because they just, for whatever reason with their schedule, they can't make it live and they just end up watching it later. Plus, he also brings up another really good point that on-demand shows are a lot easier to produce because you don't have the stress of making those mistakes live. If you're recording it, you can take your time with the edit and make it look the exact way that you want. Maybe you say something that you regretted. You can cut that out of the show. So absolutely, and I still do productions that are not live streamed because my client really wants to be able to edit the show, and he has guests that sometimes say, well, I need you to cut this so-and-so segment out, or, I can't have that live, and that's going to damage my career if I so people are not very good at censoring themselves, people that are not broadcast professionals like Mitch, and you do have to be sensitive about that. If you've got guests coming in, sometimes they're going to want you to cut stuff out of the show that they don't like. So you have to be careful about that. And absolutely being able to take your time with the edit, that's pretty nice to be able to do that.
I think we're like SpaceX. I think we should embrace our iterations. You can blow up a couple boosters on the way to getting somewhere. They kind of applauded it when the first few went up and blew up. It's like every time they make a mistake, they learn from that mistake. We're the same way. I invite the errors, the mistakes, the problems that can come up. Well, what did I do? Okay. I invite those things because I think people are like, wow, what just happened? And then they sit there and they try to figure it out. Oh, he was laying his finger on the cut button on his ATEM. And by the way, the button on the ATEM, very, very sensitive. I wish they had an impact ratio you could adjust. It's like you breathe on it and it starts jumping. And if, God forbid, you hit the fade to black button and you get stuck there, because it's so easy to lean on it. And before, there we go. All that stuff starts to happen. So making mistakes is part of having a podcast. And I think people will forgive you for that. Unless you do something horribly wrong, like cursing. All right, once in a while, maybe it's okay. But for the most part, just don't do it there just for the sake of being able to drop an F-bomb or do something graphically too much information or whatever the case may be. So getting back to the original purpose of this podcast, of the broadcast Boffins, what's the most important thing that you need to get together? First of all, you need a decent subject. You can't. It's not like it used to be where you can just do a podcast and show everybody what you had for lunch, or beef about the apartment above me just leaked all over my my studio, which happened, by the way. I think you need to have something that contributes. And one of the things that Alex and I talked about when we first started doing this is, I'm the old DJ from the 70s and the 80s. Okay. But what would make it more interesting? Well, what would make it interesting is have the old angry guy that's trying to recapture some of his past glories and balance that out with somebody that's more recently involved with technology. We have a lot of disruptive technology. And I think between Alex and myself, we've really got a great balance here because he keeps us honest as far as contemporary thinking, me screwing up pronouns. And I'm still kind of tug-of-warring back to, when I was a kid, we had to play records and tapes, and we had to be in motion, and we got paid very little money. I mean, all of those kind of things, and it kind of balances each other out. So far, I think it's working, that we're giving people a little bit of entertainment, a little bit of information. And I'm not totally backwards. I'm a geek that loves technology. We're not here to geek shame other people, but being able to do things and talk about, what it was like. Like we were talking just recently before show, I was trying to ask Alex, it's an age-old question, what the hell is Canadian bacon? Do you have any idea? What is Canadian bacon? It doesn't look like bacon. It doesn't taste like bacon. What the hell is, and it's round. What's the story with Canadian bacon? Inquiring minds want to know.
I'm not sure what the story is, other than the fact that when I was a kid and somebody would give me Canadian bacon, it was, I just said somebody gave me ham. It looks like ham to me. It's the same consistency. And I don't know about you. Everyone likes their bacon differently, but when I cook bacon, I like
crispy.
it not super crispy, but it's got to be like, I don't like floppy bacon. It's got to be a little bit firm, right? That's how I like to eat it. By the way, I just wanted to bring in another comment because we have lots of questions coming in here. That Shoji Productions was asking us about what's the next big upgrade to your broadcast, and I will say what I want to do, but I'd like to get your thoughts, Mitch. But one thing that I'd like to do is because right now this whole production is being done on a base model Mac 2 M2 processor with only 8 gigs of RAM. I've been conducting 4K tests. I'd like to move to something with a little bit of a more beefy GPU and a little bit more memory before we do that. In my test, the GPU was getting taxed quite a bit, just even in my test with just having one person in there. So probably going to get that new M4 Mac Mini that comes out. But Mitch, yes. what would you like to see, like if you look out on the horizon for the show?
Getting paid.
Yeah. I mean, that goes without saying, I think.
I mean, look, we're not with our hand out, quite yet. But why don't we make it a streaming? We'll call it Last Angry DJ Plus, and we'll get bought by Discovery or Warner Brothers, and then we'll make the big bucks. But for now, we're going to do it for nothing. I completely am happy leaving it in your hands, Alex, to decide. I like the idea of making your job more manageable because it is hard to TD a show, technical direct, button pushing, and be on camera at the same time. I don't really have anything to do other than to write notes, which I do for the show, and keep track of the time, which you can't tell, can you? So it switched over. Yeah, I'd say so. And you know what I think I would do? It would be to be able to switch in YouTube clips and things like that. Maybe that's something new, or maybe sound effects, or something that won't get us flagged by the music police. It'd be kind of cool to do a cat video once in a while, or something that we see that's funny. There's some deep fake stuff that's being done now it's shocking on TikTok that they have presidential candidates and people from all over the world doing things, and it's like AI's doing that. It's got to be AI doing it because nobody took the time to draw that frame by frame. So that's my big thing, is being able to pipe YouTube in. But what's the intellectual property repercussions? I mean, if you start using other YouTube clips on a YouTube show, are you going to get flagged? Do they complain? Do they make you take it down?
You can, which is why I don't really do stuff like that. So yeah, it really depends. If you're, I know one thing that will get you in trouble is, and it's gotten other people in trouble. Like if you ever watch Twitch shows when they try to cover Apple announcements, if you embed or show any part, even for a split second, of somebody else's live stream from Apple, they'll just automatically flag you, and you can get your stream shut down. In fact, actually, I remember once I think it was a couple of years ago where Twit was they were embedding Apple's live stream, and they're not only did the stream get shut down, but their entire account got flagged, and they couldn't, like, it was down for a while.
Why? They're friends of Apple. I mean,
so yeah, well, Apple's legal department is very sensitive about stuff like that.
No sense of humor. Okay, well, there you go. So it's sort of opening a Pandora's box, but I think it would be fun to say, hey, did you see this thing? It was hilarious. And I share it with people. And I know that when you get shared from, TikTok or whatever somebody's sending you, sometimes it's funny. Most of the time it's just annoying as hell to get a message from somebody for something that they're thrilled to death about and think that they've now enlightened you about their sense of humor. I'd rather be funny just for being funny. What's that?
I said, well, you have a camera switcher, and so do I. So, I mean, there's nothing preventing you from bringing in your web browser into your ATEM, not the color bars, but
something's wrong with those color bars, by the way.
There's nothing preventing you from bringing in a browser window and playing something from YouTube. So you could do that now if you wanted to, and so could I. But the question is whether or not we would have our stream flagged or not for playing copyrighted material.
I would use Playout B if I were to do that. Jonas's program.
Yeah, you'd have to prepare those clips in advance though for the show.
Right.
For sure.
I know you can suck the video out of YouTube. There's some applications.
Yeah, I've got Downy, which is a great app for that.
Trying to think that I have one that I use all the time. Clip Grab. You put the URL in there and it sucks it out, puts it up on your screen. So is that illegal? I don't know. But again, getting back to the questions, why don't you look at some of the questions while I yak a little bit here? I would say the most important thing is to have great sound. It's not that hard to get it. There are so many easy solutions out there. Again, when somebody asks me, what do you do to get sound? I'll say, sure, MV7 Plus. That's the way to go. There are lots of other microphones, but some of them don't have USB. And when you don't have that, then you got to have some intermediate device, like a Sound Devices or a Focusrite or there's a ton of them. SSL has one. How's that Big Knob treating you, Hershey? Other things like that. There's devices out there. So it just tends to make it a little more complicated. The software solutions for audio processing, I'm a little suspicious of them. Sometimes they work great. What are we using here on your audio prep for what we're doing here, Alex?
Are you asking about my audio chain specifically, or
what are we using to clean our audio up before it goes out to YouTube?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not a whole lot. So with you, I mean, I've just got the raw audio of Mitch coming in through Zoom inside of Mimo Live. I'm not doing any further processing because he has his own. Like, Mitch has a really good signal chain, so he has a nice microphone, AKG C414 XLS, I believe, is the flavor of microphone he's using, and that goes into a Symmetrix 528E microphone channel processor. So he's got a good signal chain. I'm not doing anything to it. So that's the raw audio. And then, of course, I have my own audio chain as well going into Mimo. So I've got a AKG C414B ULS, which is an older microphone. It's got mechanical switches on it. They actually don't make this microphone anymore. And that microphone goes into my digital mixer. I'm using a Soundcraft UI24 digital mixer. And I've got no compression. The only thing I have is on the microphone, I've got the high pass filter turned on, which is very gentle roll off at about 75 hertz because the microphone's pretty close to me, and that just removes any sub bass frequencies, low end junk that I don't need in my voice as well. So that's about it.
Yeah, and most radio people are really picky about their mic sounds, and almost all of them in every studio I know of will have a decent mic, usually a Shure mic or an RE20 or whatever, and they go into some type of audio processor. In the old days, the Symmetrix 528E that Alex just mentioned, it's an analog device that a lot of radio stations use. They're not using them so much anymore. A lot of digital devices or digitally controlled analog devices. I have a super expensive Neve 8801 that's in the rack over here, which I use for voiceover work. It's analog, believe it or not, but it's digitally controlled. And it's got that Neve sound. If you know what an 8801 console sounds like, it's literally doing that in a single rack-mounted processor, the preamp, the de-esser, the compression. And when it comes to things like that, radio guys want to get it all I hear. Like, watch Howard Stern when he's talking. He's like pushing his processing like so hard. It's kind of annoying. I believe that 2 or 3 dB, just light processing, is good enough. Maybe a little bump around 3 or 4K. It's all you really need. And like Alex says, if you have boomy things going on around you, it could be an air conditioner or something that's getting bumped around on your desktop, it's best to engage that high-pass filter. So, because there's really not a lot in your voice 75 hertz and lower. There's really not much there. I mean, all that bassiness that you hear in my radio voice is probably around 150, 100. And I don't boost that much. It's pretty much straight. So we're giving so much emphasis to sound because it's the one thing that you can notice. I think your brain is just wired to hear sound first. Like when we were out on the plains of the Serengeti, searching for food, when the pack of lions or wolves were approaching us, we were listening for them, either indirectly or directly through our binaural hearing, through a stereo, so we could tell that there was something there, and we could tell where it was coming from because we could, lock into it. It's the same way when you edit videotape, is you always switch to sound first before the video. I mean, that's the way I've been taught to do it over the years, because you hear something before you see it. Because if somebody's talking over here, then you hear them start talking, and then you turn to address them. It's not like all of a sudden his voice just magically appears out of nowhere. So those are some of the things and reason why that we like to emphasize sound. Any other chats going on?
Yeah, and we have Ernesto that just joined us in the chat as well. It's funny because he was saying, I have a thin voice, I need more bass in my sound. And Ernesto, Aphex, which was a very famous company that made a lot of very popular audio processors. They actually were, a couple of years ago, they were acquired by Rode, which many of you know. Rode makes microphones and the Rodecaster console and lots of audio stuff. But they've integrated a lot of their stuff in there. So if you want that, what they call the big bottom effect, that will add that low end, that girth to your voice if you want. You got
to be careful with that, because it literally will make your
radio voice.
It'll make your bottom bigger. I mean, literally. Anyhow. But exactly. Here's the other thing about that, and I got an opinion about that as a voiceover guy and an instructor, is that if you want to sound like James Earl Jones by buying a piece of equipment out there, it's not going to happen. If you don't have it in the first place, you're not going to fake the EQ and compression devices out there into making you sound like that. That comes from years of practice. As you get better at it, it's like I think Alex, you've said this, that your vocal cords and your voice is like a muscle. And the more you exercise it, the more you can sound like you do. I have a good voice because I've used it and I've been trained to use it so much that I sound the way I sound. I also understand mic techniques so that if I want to go in for, it was a scary night and lo and behold, you work the mic in order to, emphasize the magic of the sound. You can't twist a knob and instantly have what we call a ballsy voice.
No?
No.
What about if I get real close? In a world.
Well, you don't sound like Don LaFontaine. You might be dead as him, but not quite there. But, yeah, hey, look, nowadays, the big voice people is like the old way of doing things. Nowadays, sounding natural is the style. So don't try to push for something that the market isn't really going after. They're not looking for ex-radio DJ voices like mine anymore. They're not looking for, big. I was never a big voice guy,
right?
But I have a deep enough voice. But I have a voice that cuts through, and that was what I always wanted to do.
Definitely has a certain presence to it. But you're right.
Yeah,
when I went to broadcast school, they actually actively discourage people from putting on a voice. They really train people to just be themselves. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't, your voice is a muscle. You need to practice it. I think you can be yourself and still, practice and have a good sounding voice, because diction matters. And so I think it's really critical for people to as much as nobody likes hearing their own voice at first, but I encourage you, when you record yourself, to listen to yourself, and over time you will get better. But you need to actually listen to yourself and pay attention to all the little crutch words that you use, the ums and ahs and awkward pauses, and you need to be aware of that, because you will get better over time. You have to develop that skill, like Mitch said. And by the way, actually, I should answer this question, because Hershey Trivedi's asking, how many decibels do those XLR ports push out on that interface? Okay, Hershey,
which
you're
interface?
Talking about the gain on my mixer. I think my mixer delivers just a hair under 60 dB of gain on the mic preamp. So you're talking about microphone preamp. So I just want to address that question. So hopefully that helps. Basically, with any, just to get back into that for a second here, with any interface these days, if you're going to use dynamic mics in particular that have a low output sensitivity, you're going to want to make sure you have a good sounding mic preamp that has a lot of gain, that gives you a lot of headroom, so that when you turn it up, you don't get noise, self noise. And that's something that, and this has gotten better over time. A lot of manufacturers have addressed this, and they realize now a lot of podcasters are using microphones that need a lot of gain, like the Shure SM7B. Anyways, I just wanted to address that question, because Hershey's been patiently waiting for an answer for that.
Yeah, and by the way, Hershey, you don't need another microphone. Please stop buying microphones. I know he's smiling right now when I say this.
He has an RE20 now, and he sounds really good on that RE20.
I think that the mic he had before, I forget what he had. But anyhow, sorry, Hershey. But here's the thing, is that everybody has a microphone with their name on it, and they all sound different for everybody. Some voices sound better. I sound pretty good on a condenser mic. I used to use RE20s, RE27s, RE16s, the old Shure 5s, all that stuff. And they all had various characteristics that I either liked or I didn't like. But I feel comfortable with this 414, mainly because it's not too far distant cousin from my U87, which I really know well, because I've been using it for 30, 40 years. And it's been that long. I'm comfortable with that. It's same thing with processing. We were talking to Frank Foti last week, and he was giving away the secret of the sound he created for Z100 in New York. There was a time in the mid-'80s where a station came out of nowhere. They called it going from worst to first. And Scott Shannon was at the helm of the station. Frank was their engineer. And they crafted a very unique microphone sound. They used old technology to make that done. And for the longest time, it was a secret. But the old LA3A Uri, the one with the photo cell in it, it's like a well sought after, unless you buy a remake of it, microphone or processor.
I think you might be talking about the LA2A from Teletronics. That's an
No, I'm thinking of the 3. He had he was definitely using the 3.
Okay.
Which was
that
was original,
very different design.
Yeah, different design with the photocell in it, and it had an electroluminescent. But anyhow, the magic of that design happened to be the thing back then, and it made a magical sound. So, everybody, there's a processor and there's a microphone with your name on it, Hershey, and you just got to keep looking. Eventually, you'll find the one that you're most happy with. But it's like I notice a lot of people on office hours trade out different microphones from show to show. And I've seen everything from somebody that uses a Neumann, what's it, a TL103 or
TLM 103. Yeah,
103, and then they'll switch to a not a Stellavox. What am I thinking?
Oh, the Stellar, the Texzone Stellar X2,
yeah,
which
Stellar
I also
X2.
own. And I love
it.
It's a good sounding mic.
There's a couple of microphones out there that cost $30, and they sound pretty darn good. And the difference between a $30 Stellar microphone and that guy right there may be minuscule. The difference is that costs new about $3,500. So, I'm not bragging about what I paid for the gear. It's just finding something that fits well, fits your voice, fits your your situation. And if you want, like, if you have a noisy background, you got a lot of computers in the room with you, there's nothing better than sound devices. Using one of those little mix pre's that has the built-in digital noise reduction on it. It just sucks it right out of the room. I don't know how it does it. It's magic. It's pretty crazy. I have a friend that's retiring his audio business, and he's got a Cedar DNS 3 or 4. No, they don't have a 3. They have a 2 and a 4. And I might try to snap that up. And that's the one where you sit in the room quietly and you hit the learn button on it, and it says, "Oh, I can tell there's a fan over there and outside air conditioner there," and it just just takes it totally out of the mix. So, but that's crazy. I mean, for the most part, on a Zoom call, you don't need any of that stuff. You know, a decent gate or an expander will get the job done for you. And as far as cameras go, Alex, I'll let you talk about that. I just know when somebody quick asks me, what do I get? I go for I mentioned a 360. That's kind of like the camera of choice, but I hear that's being replaced by a new version of it. There's something else coming up.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on your budget. If you can swing it, and this is going to be my next camera, the Sony FX30. And the reason why is because those Sony FX cameras have a cooling fan. They are really designed for video. They're designed to be run for longer periods of time without shutting down. Now, on a lower end budget, I'd probably recommend something like the Sony ZV-E 10 Mark II, which just came out. You're going to, by the way, all these cameras, you're going to want to not run them on battery power. You're going to want to get the dummy battery for it. And Mitch is showing, he's got, I believe, the first generation camera there. I'll switch to his.
Yeah, it's
shot.
the ZV-E 10.
The ZV-E 10. Yeah,
Not a huge difference.
Good camera, APS-C sensor, which is awfully close to the Super 35 on the FX30. But the thing with the ZV-E 10, I hate Sony's nomenclature, by the way. Hate it with a passion. The thing with those cameras is they don't have a cooling fan. So they can and probably will overheat if you record internally because it puts more stress on the processor. These cameras are not really designed. They call it the vlogger camera. So these are designed for short bursts of recording, 10, 15 minutes at a time, going outside, recording, short form content. But, I was watching actually a recent review of that camera on Gerald Undone's podcast or his YouTube channel. And he was saying even in a studio controlled environment at about 72 degrees Fahrenheit, that he found that the ZV-E 10 Mark II would overheat after about an hour of being left on in recording mode. So it probably would fare better if you just put it in the dummy battery. Like if you just want to use it as a web camera, put it that way, to go into Zoom, you'd probably be fine with just clean HDMI out, put the dummy battery in there and get the external power supply. You'll probably be okay. And that camera is under $1,000. Of course, you still have to buy a lens with it. You can get them bundled with a kit lens as well, which is not the greatest lens, but it's an okay starter lens, probably 50 millimeter. So that's good on a budget because you want something with really good autofocus because, we don't have the kind of budgets where we can have camera operators that can continually adjust our autofocus. And of course, there's Blackmagic as well, but Blackmagic cameras don't have good autofocus. I mean, you can slap an autofocus powered lens on there, but you have to constantly hit the button to get it to refocus itself. It doesn't have that like super quick responsive focus that Sony cameras do. And of course, not just Sony, but even Canon nowadays. Canon has excellent autofocus, and even Panasonic now with the new GH7 Micro Four Thirds, they finally put good autofocus in the new GH7. So if you're already married to the Micro Four Thirds format like I am, and you have a bunch of lenses, that new GH7 is looking awfully good right now.
Or as Ernesto points out, he's got a Sony A7, and he says it does not overheat. Here's the thing to keep in mind: if you're using it for a Zoom call and you're not recording on it, if you're trying to push a 4K stream into an SD card while you're shooting with that camera, it's going to get hot if it's on for hours at a time. My FX3 does have a fan in it. I don't think I've ever heard it. It might have come on once or twice. It might have shut down once in 3 years, and I just leave it on all the time. It's not really that big of an issue. So if you're shooting films or doing something or doing broadcast, completely different criteria. Films like short burst of shooting for one period of time, dark rooms, different. Maybe a Blackmagic camera is what you need for that independent film you're doing, but maybe you're doing a broadcast thing, and the Sony works well for you. It's that's why there are Chevys and Fords and Volvos out there. You got to pick the right equipment to do the right job. Yep. Don't overdo it. Like I definitely overstepped with my FX3. I'm happy I have it. I have a nice lens on it, and I'll probably have it for a lot longer.
Yeah, it's a beautiful camera.
Thank you. It is full frame, and it gets me that nice bokeh that I've got going on behind me. I could push it even more if I wanted to. But again, it just gives me bragging rights, and that's a dangerous area to go into when we were on office hours. We used to pick on each other a little bit about, you got to get this pixie dust or that kind of camera, or that kind of wire, or that kind of microphone. It's like I say, everybody's got a different solution. As long as the end result is viewable, looks good, and stands up. That's the important thing.
Yeah.
Got some more
Another question in
coming?
the chat. Shoji Productions is asking if the two of us have met in person, and no, we have not yet, but at some point we will.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a culmination of a great friendship. Alexander and I think, met on After Hours, and I recall when you first came on and you're kind of looking around wondering what this thing was about. And I remember explaining to you, and I said, come on over to the panel. It'd be a great thing. You're perfect for it. And you kind of looked apart back then, too. You had that little puff of hair on the front. I said, we need younger people on here, people that look different from all over the world, for that matter. And to Alexander's credit, he's come a long way in a lot of different ways. But, for example, he's now hosting Audio Wednesdays, and he's also a reader on the weekends. I saw you read Saturday's show. You've made some progress, and it's because you're using that instrument. You're using that presence. You're beginning to understand how to look at the camera and not say between every word. Some people are meant for it. Some people are not. But again, another one of those important things.
Yeah, and I appreciate you mentioning that. The thing is that I also had been podcasting, doing audio podcasts for a long time. So I remember going back, if I listened to the early stuff that I did, and I started in 2012, I can't listen to it. I just hate the way I sound. I said a lot, and it just drove me insane. So I had practice. It's not like I didn't have practice before, but the video side of things was a much newer thing for me, because as an audio engineer, that was my background. So I didn't really, before office hours, didn't really know that much about how cameras work. I couldn't tell you what ISO meant. I couldn't tell you what aperture did on a camera. I learned that just through, being around people like you on the show and just learning from others, and I still continue to learn every day. So it's been an incredibly valuable tool. And doing days where I host, I find really helps me improve my communication skills too. Because, I used to run a podcast network. I had 6 active shows, and I got burnt out doing that. And so I had stopped doing that for a number of years and started focusing on producing shows for other people. So I felt like I got a little bit rusty. So getting back into office hours and flexing my vocal cords a little bit really, really, really helped.
Yeah, and to that point, I've been at this a long time, so there's a certain degree of, I've been doing this, not my first rodeo. But there's a lot that I picked up in the 3 years that I was on office hours, and I enjoyed it. It was a great time to be there, and I made some good friends, including Alexander here. But my very good friend, Ray Franklin, who's a presentation coach, has given me some tips, and they're things that are so basic that I would think, hey, Ray, I've been at this. It's not my first rodeo. And he'd say, yeah, but when you do that thing, you really don't need to do that. You're already little things. And also making contact with the camera. And I also hosted a reader workshop on office hours, which made me focus a little bit more on what it is that I do as I practice reading copy or asking questions or doing a presentation. A lot of say I just said I just did it again. So when you start thinking about it, then it really starts to come out and bite you on the butt. The whole point of doing programming is that you will learn. If you do it, you will learn. And as long as you have a reasonable presentation with some quantity of material that people can engage in and learn from and maybe be entertained along the way. I like the idea that we're a little looser here than we are on other programs. I think that's fun. Let's have some fun while we learn something. Don't you remember the teachers you had in high school that had the biggest impact on you? A lot of them, I bet they were people that were fun and understood you and weren't like really dry and humorless. Yeah. And yeah, back in my day, it was all you had to memorize everything. Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. It's like I don't quite use that in today's world, but those are the people that made an impact. And we need to make connections, and that's part of what we do. And here's the other thing that's kind of an irony. I'm going to reach out a little bit here for this one, is that the art of having a conversation is becoming a lost art today because of the subject matters being so polarizing that we're so tribal in our conversations and so disrespectful of the other person's point of view that it's very hard to have a meaningful communication with anybody. And the fact that we're spending more time at home, maybe because of COVID, but maybe also because it's easier to engage this way and control the your situation, that we're losing a lot of those skills because there is so much hardwired into our brain that's body language. The tilt of your head, the where you're looking with your eyes, where your shoulders are turned, all of those things, they affect. Yeah, Alex is in there doing his yoga right now. All of those things affect the way that you present, and I think that's becoming a lost art. So, in addition to my preaching about get rid of that high fructose corn syrup, get rid of MP3 files, I'm going to add to that. Spend some time conversing with somebody, even somebody that has a completely different political view than you, and find out if you have some common ground. There's going to be common ground there somewhere. Don't try to embarrass them or make them feel badly. We've really lost that. I think we're all getting a little tired of the rhetoric that we all throw around, and I'm not being political.
I don't disagree.
Yeah, I think that's a problem. What makes Canadian people so much more easy to get along with? Is that just a myth,
think there's a bit of I think there's a bit of a myth on that, and actually Ernesto in the chat is supporting what you're saying, Mitch, that we spend too much time trying to learn about each other's differences as opposed to learning what we have in common. Because I think if you dig a little bit deeper, spend the time, that we have more in common than we think, right? And to answer your question, I think it's a bit of a myth about Canadians. I know a lot of people say Canadians are polite, but to be honest with you, in my experience traveling to various cities all across the United States, I find actually a lot of Americans to be a little bit more approachable and friendly. I think there's it's a West Coast thing, like here in the Northwest too. With Vancouver, people in Vancouver are a lot very much like, I'm on my phone, I got my earphones in. Don't talk to me. Don't look at me. I don't want to be bothered. And then if you start talking to them, they're like, "Why are you talking to me?" They give you this look like, "What are you doing?" And I find that a lot of Americans seem to be a lot more friendly in my experience. And I know I'm not the only one that thinks this.
That's kind of you to say that. It's not necessarily true, but I think there's also a little bit of everybody feels entitled nowadays. Everybody's entitled to something. And that shows disrespect towards authority, where authority is just trying to do their job. But we're not going to solve that here on this program. But I just want to acknowledge that it's all about communication, and we're talking about communication here. And I think that the idea that this show, for example, is about helping people. We want to help you have a better Zoom experience. We want to help you do a podcast for the right reasons. It's like I thought a long time before I decided to do The Last Angry DJ, because I just didn't want to see another burned out DJ from the 70s and 80s and 90s to come on and say how great it was back then and how horrible it is today. There's got to be something worth saving there. By the way, bad news. Our friend of show and guest that was on here, Andre Gardner, who's the top DJ in Philadelphia, worked at radio station WMGK, classic rock station, loves the business, enthusiastic and passion beyond measure, was just laid off on Friday. And that, to me, disturbs me greatly about the state of the industry, not just because it's happening all over the world, but because it happened close by and it happened to a friend. And I know Andre well enough to know that, and I salute him right now by saying this. He went out with a very classy salute to his employers, which was easily broadcast, by saying, thank you for letting me have my last show. Because like when I got canned from WFIL, I did my show and then I got called into the office and that was my last show and I didn't even know it. So I didn't get a chance to say goodbye or anything. That's a horrible thing about the radio business. But if we've gotten to the point where talent and quality and your likeness of Andre being liked and be loved by the people of Philadelphia being fired because of it wasn't fitting into a corporate situation speaks poorly for the industry as a whole. And I'm sure that he's not the only story being told about. If you're a high-profile radio announcer or personality being paid a decent sum for your the quality of your work, and you're number one, guess what? You're probably the first one to go nowadays. Used to be that your ratings were bad, they lay you off in a New York second. But nowadays, it can happen to anybody, and it happened to Andre. I'm sure he'll land on his cat's paws. I hope so. As hard as he can go. Definitely. And we're playing around with the idea of engaging our chatters on the live portion of the program. I think still the people will still engage on the audio only after the fact because the questions help us focus what it is that people want to hear about. And I think that's going to be fun. We want to thank Laura Thompson for saying that she would help out handling the chat as it comes in. And I think we have some technical things to have happen before we start running the chats on the screen. But we want to let you know that we appreciate all that input, and we encourage you to tell us things that, that maybe something we said went by real quickly and they want us to come back up a little bit and say, well, that A7 camera does this. Didn't you know that? Or where do you like to set your EQ settings on your processor? Those are very helpful. And also asking us, what kind of guests you're going to have on. Say, hey, I know this person. I get it all the time where people are sending me emails saying, hey, this person was great on this show. And it may not even be about what you would expect. And that's part of the spice of life when we do these programs is that we can get guests on that wouldn't normally, talk to you in a conversation. I like it for that reason. We had Gary Berkowitz on a few weeks back. Gary's not somebody I could just call up and start chatting with. He was somebody that we brought on the show, and now we became great friends. Frank Foti, I've known him for ages, but I never had that kind of a conversation with him that we had last week. So we want to continue that thing. And who would have thought that Alex and I would be able to have these kind of programs where we were each other's guests? I mean, he asked me questions, I asked him questions. People like you ask us questions, and we answer them. We're contributing something. There's a reason that we're here. We feel good about spending banged into the microphone. We feel good about being here every week. We're not so concerned about the money. That'll be nice somewhere down the road if it gets. But we're up to, 125. Thanks for the hearts, by the way. We're up to 125 subscribers. That's okay. We had to start somewhere. And 125 is a good number. We'd love to see 1,000. There are 7 or 8 people watching. That's not bad. Maybe there were more of them listening earlier. It's the nature of the beast. We can see nowadays with the metrics that we get off of YouTube, we can see that, when we talked about this, we got a bump in listeners. And when we talked about Mitch's dating habits, it dropped way, way below and then went back up after that. So some of the cool stuff. Alex, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, a couple things, and actually I just want to bring in, there was one last comment here from, it was I've lost track of the chat here. Oh, Ernesto was asking, have you guys tried using AI voice technology? Why or why not? And yes, I have messed around with Google's Notebook LM, which is a service that allows you can upload files and it will create a fun, two-person conversation, like a podcast out of it. And at first I thought, this is just goofy. I've heard the examples and I thought it was just insufferable. I couldn't really listen to it. Then I tried it. And what I did was I uploaded a technical manual. And Mitch, actually, you might find this kind of amusing, but I uploaded the manual, which is very well written for the Symmetrix 528E mic processor. And there's these two people, a man and a woman, having a fun, lighthearted conversation about this incredibly nerdy technical document. And it actually occurred to me that this could actually be really useful in education. I think it could actually make something remotely interesting that maybe was drab and boring, like a technical manual. So I think it serves a purpose, and whether or not people are going to use it in school, I don't know, but it's an interesting technology. The voices don't sound terrible either. So
no, they're pretty good. They make sometimes stupid, like really stupid mistakes, because the English language is very hard and some words are spelled but said completely different. It's all the context. And AI is not smart enough necessarily to separate out the context of the question or comment that they're doing. I've seen a video of the two iPhones talking to each other with AI, and they're having a regular conversation. They're going at it, and they're having a blast. As a voiceover person, I'm a little bit prejudiced against AI because I see it as a disruptive technology that ultimately is going to, cause me some harm because I'm not going to get work. I recognize it also as a useful tool for technical stuff and boring conversation, but to have personality and a little verve in the conversation, it hasn't quite got that good yet. But I say yet because the whole AI thing is out of the bag. It's here to stay. Many billions, maybe trillions of dollars are being spent on making it the thing. And it's going to be, they had the Iron Age, the Bronze Age, the Steel Age. This is the AI age. And AI is going to be a force to reckon with. And all the pundits that come out, like Elon Musk, that say that once AI starts writing its own code and start doing its own thing, it's going to be a force to be reckoned with. I guess so. I'm not concerned of it coming in, like I said before, like Skynet and taking over and crushing humanity. I think we're going to give it to them. We're going to get lazy and start giving things away to AI so that it can do its thing to help us out, because that's what it's there. It's a helper. It's supposed to do the things we don't want to do. Well, that pretty much wraps up our conversation back and forth. I think we kind of scratched the surface of what it takes to do a podcast, and we're always willing to do that. And any other subject that you may want to suggest. Alex, how do they get in touch with us to let us know?
Thank you, Mitch. Yeah, people can get in touch with us by going into our Discord community. So a lot of you have already joined there. And if you don't know how to join, I will put up a QR code. No, actually, sorry, I don't have a QR code. I got to fix that. Most of you are already in there. That's one way that you can communicate with us, of course, on social media at The Last Angry DJ. Follow us everywhere, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We're not posting a lot of content there, but you can always reach out to us. We have an email address, contact form. If you go to thelastangrydj.com/contact. And of course, if you'd like to show your support for the show, tell a friend, share the podcast with other people. That's a great way to do that. And of course, patreon.com/thelastangrydj. Become a coffee supporter, which is what we like to call it. $2 a month helps support the show. Thanks very much.
Thank you, and I appreciate your, again, all the input. And again, I've got the greatest producer and co-host on the planet. Probably nobody better suited than Alex to do what he does. And he's constantly engaging to make this that much better. And a lot of people are recognizing what we're trying to do here and throwing their hat into the ring to help us out. And there's a long list of people that I just don't have the time to run. But I think we're getting to a point where we're going to start running credits of the people that give us their help and their support. So we'll get to that point. So in the meantime, Try to engage other people in conversation about things that don't necessarily polarize. Be a nice be a mensch, as we like to say. Be a person that's willing to accept other people and respect their point of view. You don't have to hate people just for the sake of hating them. Be nice. So try that out for a whole week, and we'll talk again about it next week. Thanks again. Be safe. We'll see you then.